So with the bottle bundle for April was our Jupiter's Legacy, our Royal Pippin, and our Harrison. We're gonna start here. We're waiting on Ben to just get on, but he should be here shortly. So we're gonna start here with our Jupiter's Legacy. So if you are tasting with us, feel free to crack that open, or if you're just drinking whatever you have in front of you, that's great too. Yeah, and Charlotte's going to give us a little bit of history on the Jupiters first.
Well, welcome. We started planting apples, and as I've told many of you, it was a hobby that sort of got out of hand. And we planted varieties that were interesting. Chuck, who's a cider maker, and you all know and saw here a couple of weeks ago, was interested in ciders. And so along with collecting apples for flavor, which was what was driving us primarily, I would choose things that had cider characteristics. Now, we're talking about the 1990s now, and cider was just a home hobby, and that's how we started. We had pressed fresh cider, went to the orchards in Amherst County and around here, got apples in the fall and pressed cider just a little bit. And Chuck got interested in fermenting it after we bought this place. And he was very good at it, actually, without, he would say, knowing exactly what he was doing. But when we decided to go live, is a phrase I'm hearing these girls talk about with this thing here, and I'm just watching. We were looking for, well, how do we name these things? And the first name we chose was Jupiter's Legacy. And the reason for that was the history that involves. Jupiter Evans was a slave born in Shadwell the same year as Thomas Jefferson. They grew up together. Jefferson called him his trusty servant, depended on him greatly, mourned his death, saying that it left a void in his personal life that would never be filled. He didn't make the cider, but he was in charge of the slave hierarchy at Monticello and was instrumental in its bottling and overseeing. So this was our nod to Mr. Jefferson, a great enophile, and we think of him as the father of American wine. But he couldn't grow vinifera grapes at Monticello. He could grow cider apples, though, and cider and malt beverages on my table drinks, he wrote. We thought it was appropriate to name it as Jupiter's Legacy. So it's our nod to Monticello. Here we live in the shadow of Monticello and Mr. Jefferson. And so this was going to be our historic cider. And in it, Chuck put all of our best cider apples. And since we planted about 250 varieties of apples, we had a little of this and a lot of something else and a little bit of another. And generally, this blend has 20 to 30 varieties of apples in it every year. And we put our estate grown fruit here. This is becoming more important to us because it really delineates proper superior cider, in our opinion, is cider that's orchard based, where you bring the apples into the press from the land that it's growing on. So Jupiter's Legacy is something that we're very proud of. I've called it our flagship cider in a lot of years. I think it is. It's this particular year, the apples were picked in 2015. It's 7% alcohol by volume. There's 1%, 1 gram per liter residual sugar, 5.7 cents tritable acidity. Chuck can explain all of that much better than I can. I just like the way it tastes.
Cheers.
Thank you.
So we are, as I mentioned before, doing this on 2 platforms. We're both on Zoom and on Facebook, trying this out for the first time. But we do have both chats open. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to type in a question, or if you're on the Zoom feed, feel free to just give us a shout out.
I will say too, this is what we like to serve with our Thanksgiving dinners. It's especially good with what I like to call traditional American cuisine, turkey and dressing, and those rich flavors that we associate with fall foods. Dry, crisp, acidic, great with certain cheeses, and those rich foods. So think about it come Thanksgiving.
Looks like Ben is almost on.
Oh, good.
So we do have a guest here tonight with us. Ben Watson, who is working on getting his way into the Zoom chat. He is the author of Cider Hard and Sweet, which is on its 3rd edition. If you are a cider enthusiast and have not read that book, I highly recommend it. It's got a lot of great information in it. And he just has been a great supporter of the cider industry for a very long time. He actually manages Cider Days, which is an event that happens every year up in Massachusetts. We unfortunately have never been able to. We've never personally, as a family, been able to go because it always falls on the same weekend as our festival.
I think I'm all set.
Yeah.
Yep, we can hear you.
Ben has been a major contributor to things we've done here. He's attended most of our cider forums. And aside from being just a really, really fine fellow, I call him my another brother. And so we're happy to have him with us today. We also want to remember today another very special contributor to Albemarle CiderWorks and the orchard that supports it, and that's Tom Burford. Tom was an inspiration for the apples we planted here. We bought our first apples from his nursery in Amherst County, which is the county we hail from as well. He was hugely influential in encouraging people like us to grow apples for all kinds of purposes, but especially for cider as well. And so he would come up, host Ben and our guest host for our events, and they would have a fine old time as well.
So Ben, I see you just opening the Jupiters there. Cheers.
Get the Jupiters. Cheers.
So I would say for flavor wise, on this Jupiter's, this particular vintage, which is the 2015 harvest year, it's nice and light. It's got a nice tartness to it, but it's smooth drinking, not too crazy, funky or anything, just very easy to sit and sip.
Yeah, I don't think any of ours are funky. I know that's fashionable in some quarters, but Chuck ciders are pretty clean, crisp and straightforward, which I find appealing.
Did you get Al's message?
So, so what do you think, Ben?
I think it's got a nice. It's been a while since I've had the Jupiter, but it's got a really nice mouthfeel, and it's got a nice appley finish to it as well. So you can definitely tell it comes from apples, but not ersatz. I mean, it's very natural.
Just wanted to give a shout out to Jessica and Brian on the Facebook live feed. Okay.
Hey.
What's the what are the apples that were that are in Jupiter's again?
So this ends up being quite a blend. I always, when I'm talking in the tasting room, usually talk about the number of crab apples that go in it. So things like hislop crab, Woodston crab, Doggo crab. But it really is just a melting pot from the orchard. It's got a little over 30, between 20 and 30 different varieties. Just whatever we have that year that does well in cider gets kind of blended in with this.
Special in this one.
Chuck is just off screen here, so he was going to make some comments.
We do blend other things with it. Since we make more of this, we made too much that year, unfortunately, but we're still drinking on 15. But we have some good ones coming down the pipe. But in this one, I'm pretty sure we put probably 250 gallons of Farnham Hills English cider apple blend as well. And we probably got some Pippin and wine staff mixed in as well. But the base of it is the first 15 to 20 bushels of apples that come from our orchard, which, as Charlotte mentioned, there's probably 25 to 30 apple varieties. If we had crab apples that year, we probably put them in this one. We have rusted apples that went in here. Beyond that, it's a Duke's mixture, but turn out pretty well every year. So we continue to do it.
Yeah, we are is experimenting with a lot of single varietals, which we're really proud of. But this is always a blend, and I think calling it our stateroom blend, it describes it as well as anything.
The aroma is particularly nice this time around, I think. It's very, very rich and
No,
floral and
you're there. You're still there. Sorry, technical difficulties on this end.
I'm merely sitting here. There.
So I know. So question. So Ben, how did you get interested in cider, and how long ago did you get interested in cider? Cider in America has not really been for so long, but I know you've got some friends who've been in the industry for over 30 years, going on 40. What got you interested in apples and cider?
I think seriously, I when I started to do the book, which was, in the mid 1990s, or before that, it was really in the 1980s. I started to taste alcoholic cider for the first time, and I think the first I ever probably had was of the well-made stuff was from West County Winery. It was then called West County Winery because they made fruit wines aside from ciders, and they started in 1984. Judith and Terry Malone, the late Terry Maloney, in Coleraine, Massachusetts, and that's where near where we do cider days, and that was sort of the epicenter of cider days for a long time. It's an area that is rich in tradition of apple growing and cider making up in the hill towns of western Massachusetts. And they made a farm cider, and not sure that they made any others at the very beginning. But then the second cider I probably had was one that's familiar to just about everybody as a starter cider, which was woodchuck cider, which was then being made by a guy named Joseph Cernelia, who was an ex-Wall Street guy who came up to Vermont and bought an orchard and started to make apple wines. But they also made one cider that they called woodchuck, after the nickname for people from Vermont are called woodchucks. So that's where the name came from. And they were making that as early as like 1988, 1989 in big bottles. But it pretty much tasted fairly similar to what you get in their standard amber, which is to say, not great for now, but at the time it was a leading brand, and they sort of carved out the territory.
Yeah, they've been around for quite a while, for sure.
Terry Maloney was here. Once we got started on this, once a year, we did what we called a cider makers forum, and Terry Maloney was here in 2009, I believe, and he was just a lovely, lovely man. I have a copy of his talk. I think I'll try to do something with that someday, but it was very good. He commented that he didn't like the term hard cider. It sounded so friendly, which I liked. Cider is friendly.
Indeed. So we have a couple questions coming in on Facebook here. Can you explain the difference between dry and semi-dry?
Well,
Let me take that one, and you got it.
well, we can all do it. Go ahead.
So I would say dry is if you're looking at kind of less than a 0.5 or 0.4% sugar level. Semi-dry would be just above that, so somewhere between the 0.7 and 0.4 range. It's kind of how I would classify it. I'm not sure if anyone's actually put out. I know there's guidelines on dry versus semi-dry. Another question.
In reality,
Pardon?
no, I was just going to say, in reality, we can make definitions based on the amount of residual sugar, and that's the technical definition of it, but everybody has their own idea of what's sweet and what's dry, who are tasting things. And a lot of people say, oh, I like dry wines or I like dry ciders. And in reality, they don't like them that dry. They like something a little bit sweeter. So it pretty much is in the taste of the mouth of the drinker.
Yeah.
As an eye of the beholder.
Yep.
Yep.
Just really quick, I'm moving on here to the Royal Pippin. No rush. We're just trying to fit all three of them in, and I know we're excited to get to the Harrison as well at the end there. So I'm going to open up our Royal Pippin here, and this is harvest year 2016. 100% of the Albemarle Pippin apple or Newtown Pippin, depending on who you're talking to.
Well, here we're saying the Albemarle Pippin, so there's that. The Pippin originated, of course, on Long Island, New York, as Newtown Pippin, the little village of Newtown. Now, I think, but in any event, it was our first food export. Franklin brought it to England when he was the colonial minister to the court of St. James there. But it's a fabulous apple. It may be the best dessert apple ever grown when it's properly grown. And that's, of course, can be a controversial statement, but it is a fabulous apple when it's grown well. But like lots of other apples too, they have to be picked at the proper time and grown well to really have their ultimate superiority. But it was our first single varietal. We made it the first year that we made cider here commercially, and it remains a very, very popular and important one.
This actually, one of the reasons that we chose this, other than the historical aspect of it, is this was, until we released the Harrison, this was Tom's go-to favorite. So whenever he came by and visited, and this was what he asked for.
I will say,
Chuck again is off screen.
we had a number of winemakers come and taste our ciders in the first year, and this was their favorite because I'm pretty sure they associate it with wines like Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc, and I've heard those terms used repeatedly since. I don't know that, but I'm just passing that along. So the fact that it's a single apple intrigues a lot of people, because they can actually eat the apple here and taste the cider that comes from it. And it has a lot of citrus notes in it, like some of our white wines. So enjoy.
Yep. We'll work on getting Chuck his own screen next time. That way he doesn't have to stand off.
Nonsense. He's good being
Already done
It also, I mean, the aroma to me is very, very nice and light and kind of a wine-like profile. Although I'm trying to decide how to describe what I'm smelling in here. And I think Tom Burford would say something like, oh, that's chick wintergreen or something like that. I still don't know what chick wintergreen is, but I know it when I smell it, I guess.
This is especially good with certain foods too. I do a BLT pasta salad in the summer, and this is just marvelous with it. Bacon flavors, and some chefs we've had come in to do hors d'oeuvres when we have events here. They gloam in on how well it pairs with bacon of all things. I would not have thought that except for that suggestion. It's wonderful with certain seafoods and certain cheeses, but especially the bacon flavors, I think. It sings with it.
To me, it has a little bit of the flavor has a little bit of a pear-like notes at the end too that I'm getting on this batch. I don't know if anybody else can. I mean, there is that citrusy thing that Chuck was talking about, but I also get a little bit of pear in it as well. This apple was the only one that probably 100 years after Franklin brought it over to England, it was also the only apple from the United States for a long time that Queen Victoria allowed to be imported into England. Because they were trying to, protect their own apple industry, and also they were getting apples, I think, from Canada. That was sort of when they started to switch over and get them from Canada more than from the U.S. But Queen Victoria liked this apple so much that that she exempted it from the tariffs or the import duties.
That's why we named it Royal Pippin. She came to the throne in 1837. She was very young, 18 years old. And in 1838, the American ambassador to the court of St. James was a man from Richmond, Virginia, and his wife was from Albemarle County, Enniscorthy, down the road here. They got a barrel of these apples from home. She fixed up a silver basket. He had it presented at the court, and she wrote back that never did apples win such plaudits for its homeland. They were admired and enjoyed by noble and royal palates. Lord Melbourne ate 2 huge ones. It was thought he would suffer adverse consequences. He didn't. So it was allegedly to please the young queen that Parliament rescinded the import duty on the Albemarle Pippin. And they were grown up and down the eastern slopes of the Blue Ridge here, packed in barrels, and shipped to England, where they brought several times on the markets there of what other apples did. So it was a very celebrated part into the early 20th century here. But Queen Victoria was gone then, and after World War I, that fell by the wayside. England wanted to favor the apple growing regions of the Commonwealth, New Zealand and Australia particularly. New Zealand may be the best apple growing region in the world. Unfortunately, they're 10,000 miles from their market, so needed the help they could get, I suppose.
Yeah, it's
another.
Sorry, it's a very nice. I was just going to say it's an extremely nice eating apple too, but I don't think it grows. I don't think it makes as good cider, or it's a great cider apple, but not for us in New England. I don't think it ripens well enough up here in time. I don't think it gets enough heat, and I think it's much better in the mid-Atlantic and where you are.
That was the problem in England too. The English growing season is typically not long enough for it to ripen. It doesn't ripen until very late October, 1st November, even here. And it needs that. The same thing is true of the Gold Rush, which is not it's a modern apple, come about in the 1980s. But I mean, I know there are people growing it in Ohio elsewhere. I don't know why that apple is more widely grown commercially. Well, I do know why. It's an economic thing. But the late ripening characteristic, and this is one reason we think Virginia cider is particularly superior. No offense, darling.
As you say, we're a little biased, but you know.
Well, listen, we got New Hampshire represented here. Come on.
Indeed, we have New Hampshire. We have Connecticut. We've got Al. Are you in Pennsylvania, Al? And Kim's in Pennsylvania. Jen's on here somewhere. She's in Vermont.
Yeah, Al's in northern Pennsylvania even. No, every region has its particularity and its real superiority. But I do think that there are apples like the Pippin, maybe the crab, that grow especially well here, and we're very proud of Virginia ciders.
We did have a question, since we're talking about apples. Mary Stewart on Facebook asked, what are the apples which were almost destroyed forever during Prohibition?
Apples?
Apples.
Well, there were some, it depends on who is counting, but some people say 7, some people say 17, some people say 19,000 varieties of apples were grown in the United States by 1900. Now, I don't think anybody can go out and really test that. But a lot of the cider apples just went by the board. One of the things that Tom Burford was very proud of was identifying and promoting the Harrison, which we're going to taste next. The Harrison is an apple that originated in New Jersey. And according to William Cox, who wrote the first American book on pomology in 1817, it was the finest cider apple produced in the Americas. Chuck thinks it may be the finest in the world. It's not an apple you'd eat for fun. It's dry and pithy. I mean, only somebody like Chuck, who never met an apple he didn't like, no matter what it tastes like, would really praise it for eating. But it makes fabulous juice. It's a fibrous apple, and so it produces a juice that's clear, rich, tannic, a high sugar content, and so it may be one of the well, it probably is the best cider. But we won a gold
We're not there yet, though. We have one.
Right. No, I'm sorry. I'm getting
We're
ahead of
still
myself.
on Pippin.
All right.
Um, So Ben has answered this question, but Charlotte, what got you into cider and apples?
Chuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say Tom. Well, I was interested in the apples. I like gardening. I have dirt under my fingernails again today, but that's okay. And so I had known Tom as a child. He was a little bit older than I am. And he was doing the apple tasting at Monticello. And I had a cousin who I was trying to entertain. I said, oh, would you like to do that? Oh, yeah, sure. So we went up there. And at the time, he had the nursery in Amherst. And he had 30 some varieties of apples that he was tasting. This was either the first or the second ones of those. Now, we had apples. We didn't grow them. But our dad always took us up to the orchard we'd pick up wine saps that had fallen for 50 cents a bushel. And this would have been in the 50s. And brought them back and stored them in the cellar under the house. And Mama cooked on them all year long or all winter long. That's what we did. And that's what you made mostly wine saps, mixing an apple as well. So when I started tasting these interesting apples, though, we bought the small farm, let's plant some. So I ordered 10 apples. The next year, Chuck came along and said, well, why don't you get this one and this one and this one and this one? So he went back up with me. We ordered 50 apples. And we decided, okay. And then one thing led to another. I got involved through Tom's aegis again with the North American Fruit Explorers. Well, I was the secretary of that for several years, and we went to these meetings around the country. One in New Hampshire, where we met Michael Phillips. Were you at that, Ben?
Where you met me too.
That's right, where I met, it was a religious.
2003, which John Bunker corrected me. I thought it was in 2000, but he said it was in 2003 because that's also when John Bunker met Tom as well.
Right, well, in 2000, that's the year we had it here. And so, and where did we do it in 01? I forget, but anyway, it was around the
I
country.
didn't go there.
Okay, but
That was 9/11 and it got canceled.
right, okay. Well, in 2003, though, we were in New Hampshire, and Chuck took a little bit of his cider up there, and it was well received.
Mhm.
So he considered that. I remember Michael Phillips tasted somebody's cider, and Chuck opened his, and then he was very complimentary. All right, I digress.
No worries. Whitney asked, where did you get the apples from when you were younger?
There were orchards. Once upon a time, there were orchards all up and down the eastern counties, Virginia counties east on the eastern slopes of the Blue Ridge. And the ones we went to up near Lowesville, Virginia, Campbell, the Clark Campbell's orchard was.
Burford, Rutgers.
Well, that was around Tobacco Road, but we went up further up. Well, anyway.
Campbell's.
Yeah,
Orchard.
that's where we got those, but there were a number, and Tom's family was one of those orchardists. By the time I met him, those people were gone. But those apples grew all over. Those orchards are mostly abandoned now.
So Whitney actually, and Whitney, if you want to unmute and introduce yourself. So Whitney is the head of among other things, the head of Dark Skies Bright Kids that comes and does their star party here in the fall. And she is currently social distancing, quarantining, whatever the word is, up at which observatory?
It's Fan Mountain Observatories, which is just south of you guys. So I can almost see you from my house. But this used to be an old apple orchard in the 1940s and 50s and the 1960s. So I really want to get, I live here now, so I want to plant some more apple trees back up here. I thought that'd be a lot of fun. But I don't know what to plant, but we'll talk about that later offline.
Yeah.
But
it's cool. I imagine being quarantined in an observatory, there are worse places that could.
Yeah, I am actually very lucky, and yeah, I have beautiful views, and it's just my husband and I and our cats up here. So, but yes, I'm loving these virtual tastings. These are also a lot of fun.
You know, it's hard to overestimate how important apples were not so much the 19th century, which is where your orchard probably dates from, but think about what people had to eat in the 17th century. They got here in 1607 and there was nothing. And they came without many skills to boot. So one of the reasons cider was so important, there was no coffee, there was no tea, except it was imported. It was very expensive. A woman wrote a book on, what do you call it? Every home a distillery. And she was interested in women's rights and talking about how the manufacture of cider moved from a household woman-dominated thing into the industrial system where men, since they could sell it, made the ciders. Here we kind of have reverse. Chuck makes the cider and I sell it, but other than that, we're prehistoric. But in any event, just keep that in mind as you go back. But there were orchards all over the place, and they endured into the 20th century. It was really after World War II that the American agricultural landscape became as industrial as it is now, with huge, monocrops. But all through this area, Nelson County still has five or six commercial orchards. This county only has one. I'm not counting us. Well, two, but the other ones. Anyway, there's one major commercial orchard here. There's another one that's surviving, and then there's a lot of smaller ones, maybe backyard type orchards. Amherst County only has one. Bedford only has a couple. So, but 100 years ago, that wasn't the case. But after World War II is when they really, and so your orchard, Whitney, was probably still active into the 1940s. I'm guessing, but I don't know.
It was. I can actually show you pictures of it if you want to see.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to see pictures?
Sure.
Later.
Well,
Later.
Oh, there we go.
Oh,
Look at that.
what date was that?
So, yeah, so this was in 1964, this picture, and there's actually a picture of someone here picking the apples up here at the observatory with one of the telescopes in the background.
Was that's probably one of the Bows of McClanahan's or somebody. I mean, that person there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'd visit you sometime when we're all back out to.
Please do. Please come see me.
They were probably all wine saps, red delicious, golden delicious. By that time, go ahead. Sorry, I'm digressing.
Well, no worries. I just want to make sure we have enough time because we're going to try to wrap up kind of same time as we did last time. But for the last one here, the Harrison.
All right, I jumped the gun on the Harrison. Ben, you want to comment on the Harrison?
We've gotten a little bit of history on the Harrison from Charlotte already.
Sure, we've already talked about how great the juice is, the fresh juice, and I don't think I've ever seen juice that has been. I mean, Golden Russet is a very good apple to press, but it's nothing compared to Harrison and Hughes or Virginia Crab. I think those are the two that have what I call the darkest, most viscous, sweetest juice when you press them. And they really, really make excellent cider. And you can tell there's a lot of sugar in the apples in the Harrisons because it's also, this is what, 8.9. I think that's what I saw for an alcohol by volume. So that's pretty high for cider, but it's also it's a great cider apple because it's one of the few that actually has all of the characteristics in itself. Most apples are improved by mixing with other varieties, almost always. Using 2 or 3 varieties at least produces a better cider, but the Harrison really stands up pretty well on its own. And I think one reason is because it has a very high level of phenols or tannins and other compounds in the skin, in the flesh of the apple, in the whole thing that really lead to that kind of structure that you can get in a wine, like wine grapes or something. And it's one of the higher phenol contents. I remember Greg Peck talking about this one time, who's now up at Cornell. But one of the events, the Cider Maker forums that I came to, down at your place, Charlotte. They had done research at Virginia Tech on the levels of phenols in different apples. And I know that Harrison, I think, was the highest of any of them. I think Black Twig was pretty high too. Chuck would know, but you know, it's an unusual apple, but it's also uniquely suited for cider.
Yeah. So do either of you guys, either Ben or Charlotte, do you have the story? So Harrison had been lost and was rediscovered in the 70s. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, it was in the 1970s. It was a fellow in Vermont. I think he was from Saxton's River, Vermont, which is right up on the eastern part of the state. And he sent it to Tom Burford because he knew that Tom had been searching for it for quite a while, but it was functionally extinct. Nobody was carrying it, no nurseries or anything, and nobody had found a tree in a long time. And he said, I'm wondering if this is a Harrison apple. And Tom said, well, yes, it is. I think you've got it. And the fellow said, you know, that's great. I'm going to put out a patent variety protection on it. Because he thought it was, because it was grown in the north, it had a little bit redder skin than would be typical down where you are in the mid-Atlantic. And Tom just said, oh no, we don't do that. And so he did not take any wood or any apples from this fellow. He just knew about him. But then a few years later, someone contacted Tom independently from Livingston, New Jersey, which is right near Newark, which you don't think of now as a great agricultural center for the universe, but it was Newark back in the 19th century, was renowned for its cider. It famously good cider, including from Harris apples. And a fellow had a tree, and again, he asked Tom, is this the Harrison apple? And Tom said, yes, it is. And that's the source for, you know, how it got propagated over the years. And Tom did not discover it first, but he definitely is responsible for getting it into the hands of anybody who wanted to try it, really. I mean, he was a great promoter of the Harrison, and it's now grown by many people who make cider. So
it is telling the just a bit about not patenting, because that is always a thing.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, along with Terry Maloney, believed that cider should be a friendly thing. And so, and that's one of the nice things I think about this industry in Virginia, that, you know, there is a friendliness. I mean, yeah, we're all competitors, but there's a friendliness about it too that's special. But the Harrison is particularly special, I think, and we are very proud of this. And as I was mentioning before, Anne told me I was getting ahead of the game here, we won a good food award. Anne is wonderfully useful for things like that, and Lord knows I need it. But this year in California, and went out for that. So, but here again, Chuck is the one who does it, and
it's again, Chuck is off screen. If you've not seen before, if you're just joining us, he's commenting off screen. We have a couple other questions. Ben Markey asked, in Jefferson's day, was cider all still cider?
Good question. Probably it was. Now there's a certain amount of.
Actually, he bottled it and then blew up.
Yeah, I think in Jefferson's day, it would have been bottle conditioned, so that it would have been bottled with a little bit of sugar to kind of create that carbonation, whether they intended for it to be or not. We have brought the medal. The medal is now behind us here for the Good Food Award.
Well, it's won several medals, but in any event.
But yeah, so Ben, you know, there are reports of bottles exploding, which to me means that there was carbonation in them. But it would have been carbonated just with a little bit of natural carbonation, or bottling just slightly before fermentation ended. Jerry Seidman, Jerry Seidman on Facebook is talking about, there was a story about the lost
Oh, I saw that this
I
morning.
sent it to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you did.
There was a story this morning out west. There's a group of guys that goes around and tries to find old varieties, and they had a booming year this year and found 10 varieties that were previously thought extinct. And they were all geared up actually for selling those varieties, which is how they fund themselves. And then of course,
No, it's not
coronavirus.
David. Did you remember Sean Shepherd then? He's involved with that group. And but the problem.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, I wondered if it was David Ben Scoter too, who's involved in that. He's in Washington State. It may be, there are a lot of people, there's a lot of activity out in the West now. Really very good, including the Montezuma County orchard, the preservation orchard in Colorado, southern Colorado, and they've really done a nice job. They have they've discovered a lot of varieties that were thought to be extinct or grown, 150 years ago. And but David Ben Scoter is an interesting fellow. I met him once up in Maine a couple of years ago, and he is a former FBI agent. And that's how he got his investigative talents, his skills. And when he retired, he started to apply them to finding lost apple varieties in Washington State. So.
Well, another thing that's distinctive about the Harrison too is it's got 4% of 4 grams per liter residual sugar. And so while it's completely dry, there is a certain element of sweetness in it, which harkens back to the question about dry, semi-dry, and so forth. It really is.
Plus alcohol is perceived as sweet.
And as Chuck's prompting me over here, alcohol is perceived as sweetness too. So it leads to a richness in this one that I think is distinctive. See, I'm the big sister, so I can brag on Chuck as much as I want to, even if he doesn't.
Well, we got about 5 more minutes. Does anyone either on the Zoom call or Zoom chat or Facebook have any other questions for either Charlotte or Ben?
Well, good.
We're watching
That's
both
it.
feeds here.
Facebook a second. They're about 20 seconds behind.
Yeah, there's a lag a little bit with Facebook.
Okay.
Just want to say hi to everyone. We caught a couple people at the beginning, but thanks to everyone who's on the Zoom call today and who bought cider, to take along with us, and it's great having you guys and being able to connect during this time when we're all kind of not connecting.
Well, it's an interesting thing, life evolves and everything does. And so in some ways, this is teaching us a lot of different ways to approach cider, I think, and to sell it. And so Anne and Alex, who's here behind the scenes here running the show, have been very, very good in developing this virtual business, if we will. And thank you so very much for your support. Y'all are the reason we do it, and you're entirely special.
So we had a couple questions come in.
Okay.
I'm going to answer the first 2, and then we'll end with the last one there. So Carrie asked if the recording was going to be available later, and yes, it is. It'll be on our Facebook page and on Instagram and on YouTube.
There'll be a lag on
all
Instagram
around.
and YouTube, but it's on Facebook right now.
It's on Facebook right now, but we'll get it posted everywhere else later. And thank you, Jen, for reminding me. So we are hoping to do these every 2 weeks. We did the virtual tasting with Chuck 2 weeks ago, the one today. So our next one is going to be April 30th. And we'll have that posted up by the end of the week, kind of the theme for that one. So keep an eye out for that. We look forward to seeing everyone there. We're going to try to do the same thing here with the Zoom call as well as Facebook, and do the double platform. We'd love to hear your feedback on how that went. If you have any requests on what you'd like to see, what you'd like to taste, different ideas, we'd love to hear them. And then Carol asked, what are the best food pairings for Harrison?
Chuck says anything, Carol. What would I put Harrison with?
Oh, and also while you're thinking on that, Ben Markey, the Harrison is a single varietal, so it's 100% of the Harrison. Our Harrison apples used to go in the Jupiters in previous years, but once we had enough apples to make a single varietal, we started doing that as soon as we could.
Ben mentioned Greg Peck, who was Virginia's pomologist, and Cornell hired him away from us. And of course, more power to him. But he wrote a grant that we were active in promoting for fostering orchardists, the few that are left in the state, to grow cider varieties. And so we wrote letters of support to them. And Harrison was one that we were very, very eager for orchards. Orcharding is a highly skilled business. Our learning curve is terrible. Apples belong to the rose family, and they require care if you're going to get decent production. So people who have grown orchards for generations are going to be better at it than we are, we have found, to our sorrow. But in any event, so we have really promoted the Harrison, and there are now a number of plantings around the state which enables us to get enough apples. Unfortunately, all of our friends are trying for the same apples, so we are out there just competing hard and fast. But and the problem for an orchardist is the only things these are good for is cider. And so until the cider industry gets well established, they're nervous about planting them. But we have some who are really doing a good job at it, and that's wonderful.
Pairings with Harrison.
Pairings with Harrison. Rich cheeses, I would say. I did something that I was looking at. Last year, Chuck and Bill got really gung-ho into gardening, and they planted a half an acre of black-eyed peas. Now, black-eyed peas are a Southern specialty, but we've got a freezer full of them, and we were racking. Cindy, Bill's wife, Ann's mother, my sister, we're having a hard time figuring out what we do this, and I made a black-eyed pea pie. This would have been fabulous with it. Actually, I served Arkansas black with it because Chuck is coming up with Arkansas black here. But this would have been really good with it.
It's very specific, though.
Yeah.
What is in black-eyed pea pie?
Well, it was one of those spicy sausages that you're so fond of, and I am less so, but it was it had sausage, onion, jalapeno peppers. I underdid those. It could have been spicier yet, but but the peas are a bean that's a rich, earthy. So any kind of rich bean dish, this would be great with, I would think.
Spicy. Cider goes with all things spicy.
Exactly. Ethnic dishes. One of our
like curries, like Indian curries.
Chinese food.
Cheese.
I paired that truffle cheese with it when I did this tasting in Alexandria in Cider Week. That was excellent with this too. There's a cheese that has truffle flavors in it. It's really wonderful. And I'll keep thinking and write me, and I'll think of some other things.
Well, Ben Markey asked if you can post that recipe.
Oh, sure.
We'll work on that.
I'm perfecting it. I think I can do better than whoever did it, but I will be happy to. I tell you what, we send out on the, all of y'all might be members of our Insider Club, and I'll recommend it to you because I put a recipe in each of those things that go out. So far, we featured an oyster salad and ham curry dip. So I'll do the black-eyed pea.
Yep. So we are kind of coming up on our time here. Really quick, I'm going to turn it back over to Ben Watson here. Did you have any last comments? Say hi to everyone.
No, I mean, I think all these ciders are tremendous. This, it's really great to see how things have developed over the years. With Chuck, give him all the credit in the world. Even when you guys weren't selling ciders, he was for years making ciders and inflicting them upon us when we came down to visit, and they were always invariably quite drinkable and good. So he has a talent for doing it. I remember one cider that he made with I think it was half Harrison back in the days before there were a lot of Harrison trees. Half Harrison, half what is that, Georgia apple?
Yates. Yates.
And the Harrison Yates cider was one of the better ones that I had before at that time. So, you know, he has the knack. So cheers, kudos
Cheers.
to you all.
Thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure getting with you. We're going to get you down here soon, I hope.
Okay, it's a deal.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. And we hope to see you here as soon as the world opens up, which we hope it will be soon.
Sometime in May now. Thanks, guys.
Good night.